Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your rear brake pads and your rear brake rotors on a 2016 Kia Sorento. Now this is a rotor drum combo, or a lot of people call it a disc drum combo. The owner's already bought the replacements, so we're gonna swap it out. It doesn't look like it's in bad shape or it hasn't gone metal to metal, but we're gonna go ahead and change it. Now the first thing I like to do is compress the caliper piston back inside the brake caliper itself. And it's fairly easy to do that, and there's a couple different ways. Now you can just use a screwdriver and just pry it in here and press the caliper piston all the way back in. You can also take the caliper off and use a C-clamp or some channel locks, or this guy right here. This is a caliper compression tool that works pretty well. In this case, I'm going to try to push it in with just a standard screwdriver. I don't know if I'll be able to push it all the way back in, but we're just trying to pry in front of the front brake pad and the body of the caliper here. And just, if you can wedge it in there and then just work that slowly towards you. This one's actually really smooth and really simple. Now on some vehicles you can't push it all the way in, or not enough to allow for the new pad material. That looks like that might actually work. Now usually before I do this, I'm going to pop the hood and take a look at the master cylinder to make sure that there's enough level inside the reservoir for the additional fluid that's going to push backwards through the system. I've already done that on this. I just did the front brakes on this same vehicle. If you need video for that, I'll put a link in the description for you. Another thing I just wanted to mention, a lot of people will open this bleeder screw as they press the caliper piston back in, and it actually will push the old brake fluid out through here. So it's one way to change your brake fluid. Some people do it that way every time. Some people don't do it. In this case, the fluid's really clean. I'm not going to bother with that. Just doing it just this way here. And now we also don't need to bleed the brakes since we haven't opened up the system or allowed any air to enter the brake system. All right, now we can loosen and remove these caliper slide pin bolts. It's a 14 millimeter. Just going to use this impact. Now sometimes when you're trying to loosen that, this slide pin will also spin on you. If that does happen, you can always just put a little 17 millimeter wrench on there, and that'll hold it steady while you remove it. There we go. Set those aside. I'm going to grab a little hook here, and we'll just hang it up over here out of the way. Now, just like the fronts, these have got these little V springs that press the pads apart. Just pull those out, and then we can pull out the old brake pads. You'll notice this one's got the little noise maker on the bottom, on the inside. We're also going to change out this hardware here. I'm just going to pry that off right now just so it's out of the way. Now we can take off caliper bracket bolts. Are also 14 millimeter. They're just right back here. See if we can't break those loose with this. Alright, and these have got a little split washer or lock washer on there. Set those aside. Now just real quick, this is the Milwaukee Fuel. This is the extended reach M12 ratchet. It is definitely becoming one of my new favorite tools. Even if something's really tight, you know, you can engage the ratchet, and then still you can turn it. So see, for example, this is too tight for the ratchet to break it loose, but if you engage it, and then you can still just kind of use the leverage of the ratchet to break it loose, and it'll just run that out for you. And we'll set that one aside. A lot of times these will fall once you loosen them, so you might want to be careful. You may want to have one hand on this. Now to take off this brake drum / rotor or disc. Now it's got these Phillips head bolts in here. These are number 3 Phillips, and do not strip these. Be very careful. What I recommend is you use an impact screwdriver, something like this, where you can really hit the end of it and the metal goes all the way through. You can also just use an impact driver on here, but make sure that your bit is fully seated in there, otherwise you will strip it. Hitting that seems to break it loose, and then also I'll just, because this is a hex shaft here, I can just put a crescent wrench on here and just give it a little tap. That works just fine. We are going to reuse these screws or bolts or whatever you want to call them. Same thing with the other one. The impact, it seems to break it or shock it loose, but it also makes sure that the head is fully seated in there. And once that's locked in place, just give it a little turn and it'll come out and they look like that. But that can be a pretty big pain, so make sure that you're careful with those. Now also make sure that your parking brake is off, and so if you're on any incline or anything, it's a good idea to chock your tires. I've got a chock in the front wheels. Of course it's in gear. If this parking brake is on, you're going to have a heck of a time getting this drum to come off. Once you've got those screws off, you should be able just to work it loose like that. Sometimes you need to hit that with a hammer to get it loose, but looks okay. Brake shoes are actually not in terrible shape either, so we're going to keep those. Here's a part number for what I'm using today. This is the Power Stop. It's the Power Stop Evolution, and these are coated. It's kind of nice. You don't have to wipe off any of the grease or oil that's sometimes packed in these rotor or rotor drum combos here. So it's already clean and ready to go right back on. One thing that I do recommend before putting the rotor on or the drum on is you might want to brush the surface of this hub. A lot of times you'll get some rust build up there. This one's not too bad, but we'll just hit that a little bit here. On these shoes, the parking brakes, it's not a bad idea to hit those with a little bit of brake parts cleaner just to kind of knock off any of the dust and debris that's on there. And before I forget, I also wanted to mention this little rubber plug right here in the old drum or rotor. We are going to want to pull that out. That's kind of a little inspection, like a little inspection port, and you can also get in there to adjust your parking brake as needed without having to take the drum off. So there we go, got that snapped into place. Then we just line this up. Make sure that the holes line up for the screws. This little Phillips right here, just make sure that the holes line up. And I kind of like to do the same thing when tightening these, just to give it a little bump with the crescent wrench there, just to make sure that it's nice and snug without stripping this. Pretty easy to strip these, so be careful. That'll do it. Alright, now next thing we're going to do is grab these little clips, these little hardware clips. These are the new ones. This is the kit that I'm using here. This is the Z16 Evolution. There's the part number here for you. Now before we put these clips on the caliper bracket, I like to get this cleaned up. Just hit that with a wire brush, and then these just really just snap in place, usually. Now the center of these is not really wanting to go in or not wanting to seat. That happens sometimes with these metal pads, especially these aftermarket ones. So we'll probably just have to pry those in place once this is on. Yeah, for some reason these are kind of fighting me a little bit. A lot of these kits have gotten better about making these clips fit in there, but this one still is fighting me. Okay, so we got those pressed in. I kind of had to grab a little bit of some channel locks there and really press and pry those to make them fit, but they're in. Ultimately, I guess that's all that matters. Now a lot of people will put some grease underneath there as well to keep some rust from building up, and that's fine. I don't really have a big rust problem here, but I do like to put grease on the inside of this channel, and that prevents the pads from hanging up and allows them to move freely as they need to. But I am going to pull out the slide pins here. Let's just take those out, clean them up. Just going to wipe that old grease off of there. And in our kit here comes with some of this grease for the slide pins and for the back of the brake pad. Doesn't take too much, just kind of spread that around on the glove and just pop it back in there. Same with the other slide pin, just pull it out, wipe it off. A little bit of new grease right there, spread that around, and just pops right back into that boot. Just make sure you don't have any excess air in those boots. Sometimes you have to pull on them and burp any air out of there. And then with that same grease, I'm going to put a little bit into these little pad retainer clips here. Alright, now we can put this back on. Let's line it right back up. Don't forget those lock washers that are on here. Now right here is where I was talking about this little part, this little metal piece. Sometimes you just gotta wedge a screwdriver in there and bend that a little bit, make sure that it's fully seated up out of the way so that it won't rub on the rotor. And then we can torque these caliper bracket bolts. We're going to torque these to 54 foot-pounds. Okay, we got our new brake pads here, and this one here is our inside brake pad to match this. Just putting a little bit of this brake grease here on the back of the pad. You really don't need much, but this is just where it will make contact with the surface of this caliper piston here. You can put a little bit on that as well. And then you also want to get a little bit on the ends, these little ears, or this edge, which is what slides in and out of that little section right there. And we'll just press that into place. There we go. And same with the outside pad. And then a little bit at the ends here as well. And just press that in place. Kind of have to go at a little bit of an angle to catch these little springs or retainer clips at the right angle. There we go. Okay, and then we can put these little V springs back in. Just these little holes in the edges of the pad or the backing plate. Just like so. And you kind of have to hold these together while you do this. And then we'll unhook our caliper and just carefully put the caliper over those pads. And then we can put our little pin bolts back in. And then our torque setting on these is 23 foot-pounds. And remember on these, as you're turning it, if the slide pin wants to spin, you can throw a 17 millimeter on there if needed. And you're done. Now before you head out, just remember to step on the brake pedal a few times until it feels firm. Now don't press it all the way to the floor, but press it about halfway down a few times until this caliper piston is pushed out, pressing the brake pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Also, don't forget to top off your master cylinder reservoir as well. Double check all the torque specs on your manual. Just make sure you get everything tightened up before you head on down the road. Hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll put a link in the description where you can buy these pads, rotors, and a few of the other parts and tools used in the video as well. I also did the front brakes on the same vehicle, so I'll put a link to that video in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.